I didn't know humiliation could echo. That's the only way I can describe it, the sound of 200 people gasping, whispering, pretending not to look at me, while Daniel, my husband, stood at the center of the stage and tore my dignity apart. The morning had started like any other. Fresh coffee, neatly tied bun, heels clicking against the marble floors of our company, his in title, ours in effort. I had worked beside him for 7 years, building the marketing division from scratch. I thought today's meeting was about our latest project launch. But when I walked into the conference hall, I felt it, an unusual tension. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Daniel stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, there's a serious issue we must address." My chest tightened. He wasn't smiling. His jaw was locked. Then his eyes found me. "Mrs. Malik," he said using my last name, formal, distant, deliberate. "Please step forward." My heart pounded in my ears as I walked toward him, heels suddenly too loud against the floor. I forced a smile, unsure why he was calling me in front of everyone. When he spoke again, the world stopped moving. "Effective immediately," he said, "you are suspended from your position due to an ongoing investigation. We have reason to believe you leaked confidential data to an external agency." Laughter. That's what I heard first, quiet, nervous laughter from the back rows. Then whispers spread like smoke. I stared at him, unable to breathe. "Daniel, what are you saying?" My voice cracked fragile. He didn't meet my eyes. "You'll receive official notice by end of day," he said simply. "Security will escort you from the premises." Security. Escort. The words burned through me. For a moment, I thought this was a joke, some twisted prank. I waited for him to say it was a misunderstanding, that he'd explain later. But he didn't. His assistant, Vanessa, stood to the side, holding a folder. She looked straight at me with that rehearsed look of sympathy, the kind that hides satisfaction underneath. I tried to speak again. "You can't, Daniel, you know I would never." He finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable, his tone calm enough to kill. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." My knees went weak. The room blurred. I heard someone cough, someone else whisper my name. I wanted to run, to disappear, but my feet refused to move. Every project I'd led, every late night I'd stayed by his side, it all came crashing down like glass. I could see my reflection in the boardroom's tall glass wall, my face pale, my hands trembling around the file I'd brought to present. It felt like the end of something sacred, something private now, laid open for everyone to judge. The head of HR approached gently. "Ma'am, please come with me." Ma'am. Not Mrs. Malik. Not ma'am, we'll sort this out. Just a title, empty of empathy. I turned to Daniel one last time. "You know the truth," I whispered, "and you'll regret this." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't feel. The security guard led me out while the meeting continued behind me, as if nothing had happened. My entire career ended in a single announcement, while Daniel moved on to discuss quarterly targets. Outside the glass doors, the morning sun felt cruelly bright. I stood there, clutching my ID card like it still meant something. People walked past, avoiding my eyes. The silence around me felt heavier than the noise inside. That's when the tears came, not loud or desperate, but quiet, steady, unstoppable. I thought of our wedding day. The way he held my hand and said, "We'll build everything together." And now, he'd torn it down in front of everyone. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car watching employees leave the building one by one, whispering to each other as they passed. I wondered how many of them believed I was guilty. How many of them had known this was coming. When Daniel finally walked out hours later, I expected him to look at me, to explain, to show some kind of remorse. But he didn't even glance my way. He walked straight to his car, with Vanessa beside him, smiling softly as she handed him his coffee. My hand clenched around the steering wheel. The same hand that had once signed his contracts, supported his dreams, shared his home. In that moment, something in me broke, but not beyond repair. It cracked just enough for light to enter, though I couldn't see it yet. Because standing in that parking lot, mascara running down my cheeks, I finally saw the truth in his eyes as he glanced at me through his rearview mirror before driving off. There was no love left in them. Only calculation. Only distance. Only cold. And I whispered to myself, if he wanted to destroy me publicly, he should have made sure I'd never rise again. Mini cliffhanger / emotional sting. His cold eyes meet mine through the car window, no trace of love left. only the reflection of the man who just ended me. It's strange how betrayal has a face. Mine had red lipstick and a diamond necklace. Vanessa, his assistant, the woman who stood behind him that morning like a shadow that smiled. I remembered how she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder right after he announced my suspension. Just a touch, quick, careful, but my heart caught it like a crime. I tried to forget her that night, but she haunted me. Her perfume lingered in the hallways of my mind, sharp, expensive, invasive. By evening, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head, her smirk when Daniel told me to not make it harder. The way she handed him a folder before I walked out. The way he looked at her, not at me. I told myself it was paranoia, that grief makes monsters out of ordinary people. But the next day, I saw them together again. I had gone back to collect the last of my belongings from the office, security approved, 10 minutes only. I walked through the empty corridor, the sound of my heels echoing against the polished floor. The conference room door was half open, and there they were. Vanessa stood close, too close. Her hand brushed his sleeve as she whispered something that made him laugh. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in months. My chest tightened. He looked at her the way he used to look at me, before meetings, before long drives, before love turned into control. I froze, half hidden behind the frosted glass, the weight of realization pressing against my ribs. She doesn't suspect anything, Vanessa said softly, her tone laced with pride. Daniel's reply was low, almost affectionate. It doesn't matter. By the time this investigation ends, she'll be out for good. My world tilted. He wasn't just betraying me as a husband, he was planning my destruction. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The air in the corridor felt poisoned with his voice. I took a shaky step back, pressing my hand over my mouth to stop the sob that threatened to escape. My phone was in my hand. I didn't even think. I just pressed record. Every word that followed carved itself into my bones. Are you sure this will be enough? Vanessa asked. Once the board sees the reports, Daniel replied, they'll never question me. And once she's gone, you'll take her place officially. A pause. Then her laugh. That soft, triumphant sound that sliced through me like glass. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking, listening to the two people I trusted most plot against me. I remembered the nights I'd stayed late drafting proposals, the weekends I'd covered his meetings while he rested. I remembered the way he'd kissed my forehead and said, "You're my partner, not my employee." Lies. Every word, every touch, lies. I wanted to burst in, scream, throw the truth in their faces. But something inside me stopped. For the first time, anger felt focused, clean. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it. He'd twist it until I doubted myself. I'd seen him do it to others. He was a master at making lies sound logical. So I stood still, listening, recording, memorizing. When the conversation ended, I waited until they left. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger's, eyes red, jaw clenched, strength flickering behind the hurt. Outside, the night air was cold. My phone felt hot in my palm, the voice recording still playing softly through the speakers. "I'll make sure she never steps foot in this building again," Daniel's voice echoed through the darkness. The city lights blurred through my tears. I walked aimlessly, every step heavier than the last. I kept hearing Vanessa's laugh in my head, looping endlessly, like a clock ticking down to something inevitable. At a traffic light, I stopped. My phone buzzed, an email notification. From the company. My suspension letter had officially been processed. A line at the bottom caught my eye. Approved by CEO Daniel Malik and Executive Assistant Vanessa Hayes. It wasn't paranoia. It was betrayal, signed and sealed. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the world see what I'd just uncovered. But instead, I stood in the middle of that cold, empty street, clutching my phone to my chest like it was a weapon. Because it was. I had proof now, proof that could ruin him. And though my hands trembled, my voice when I whispered to myself was steady, almost cold. "Game on, Daniel." I pressed save on the recording, naming it what it truly was. Confession. Mini cliffhanger/emotional sting. I stared at the glowing screen, the word confession pulsing back at me, recorded proof of the man who destroyed me and the woman who stood beside him. I never imagined the man I married would send me an eviction notice. The envelope arrived early, thin, white official. The kind that carries words colder than any goodbye. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting an apology, half praying for one. But instead, in black and perfect typeface, were the words, "You are hereby required to vacate the premises within 7 days." The apartment is registered under company property. Company property. The same apartment I had paid half for. The same space where I cooked his favorite meals, celebrated his promotions, and hung our wedding photo above the fireplace. He was erasing me from every corner of our shared life, one legal document at a time. I sat on the couch, letter still in hand, staring at the city skyline beyond the glass window. Even the sunlight felt cruel, bright, and indifferent. It wasn't just the eviction. It was the message. I was no longer a wife. I was a liability. By noon, word had spread. My phone buzzed with messages from co-workers, some curious, some pretending to care. We heard what happened. Stay strong. Maybe he'll take you back. Take me back. As if I were a misplaced item, not a person. When the building management came that evening to inspect, I didn't resist. I just smiled, hollow and polite, while strangers walked through the rooms where I once danced barefoot. I began to pack my life into cardboard boxes, neat, quiet, mechanical. Every photo, every file, every piece of clothing folded down into silence. As I lifted one of the boxes from the study shelf, a thin folder slipped out and landed on the floor. The corner had yellowed with age, the label faded. My breath caught when I read the handwriting on the front. Property and shares, Patel and Associates, for Nora Malik. It was my father's attorney's name. I sank to the floor, my hands trembling as I opened it. Inside were legal documents, letters, and a will addendum I'd never seen before. My father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me his small savings and some old properties, or so I thought. But this folder, it was different. A notarized letter caught my eye. In accordance with my final business dealings, I transfer my corporate shares under my daughter's name, held in trust until activated by her direct claim. Corporate shares. My pulse quickened. I flipped to the next page. Company name, DM Holdings Ltd. Daniel's company. I blinked, reading it twice, 3 times. My father, quiet, cautious, humble, had invested in Daniel's company before it went public. And he had done it under my name. 30%, according to the document. I sat there, surrounded by boxes of a life I thought was ending, and realized it was just beginning. The irony made me laugh, softly, bitterly. The man who threw me out of company property didn't even know that part of that company already belonged to me. I remembered Daniel's voice from the boardroom. You're suspended. Please don't make this harder. How hard would it be for him when he learned the truth? I traced my father's signature at the bottom of the page. It felt like he was still protecting me, even from a grave. He had always been skeptical of Daniel. He'd warned me once, a man who craves control will always fear a woman with her own name. Now I understood. My father hadn't just left me inheritance. He'd left me leverage. As I packed the folder into my handbag, a strange calm replaced the chaos inside me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't the humiliated wife anymore. I wasn't the discarded employee. I was the silent shareholder Daniel didn't know existed. The next morning, I took the last box to the car. The building manager stood by the entrance, clipboard in hand. "Will you be returning, ma'am?" he asked politely. I smiled faintly. "No, not here." Because I knew exactly where I was going next, Mr. Patel's office. As I drove through the city, the skyline looked different. Not like a wall trapping me, but like a field of possibilities waiting to be claimed. When I reached Patel and Associates, the old brass sign gleamed in the afternoon sun. Inside, the air smelled of paper and trust, both things I'd lost and was about to regain. Mr. Patel recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Malik," he said gently, adjusting his glasses. "I was wondering when you'd find that folder." I froze. "You knew?" He smiled knowingly. "Your father instructed me not to contact you unless you came on your own. He said, she'll know when she's ready." My eyes stung. "I think I finally do." He slid the documents toward me. "These shares are still under your name. All they need is your signature to activate." My heart thudded. "That means I..." He nodded. "You own 30% of DM Holdings. Legally, that makes you the second largest shareholder after your husband." I stared at the pen he placed in front of me. Simple, silver, heavy with meaning. The same man who stripped me of everything had no idea I held the power to take it all back. My fingers hovered above the paper, shaking slightly. I thought of Daniel's cold eyes, Vanessa's smirk, the humiliation in that boardroom. Then, with one steady breath, I signed my name. Emotional sting / mini cliffhanger. As the ink dried, I whispered to myself, "You threw me out, Daniel, but you just locked yourself out of your own empire." Some truths arrive so quietly, they almost sound like forgiveness. When Mr. Patel confirmed what I had read in that faded folder, I felt time pause, like even the air was waiting to see if I'd break again. I didn't. Not this time. His office smelled of old paper, wood polish, and something faintly citrus. The afternoon sun filtered through blinds, striping the room in lines of gold and shadow. It felt both comforting and tense, like standing at the edge of a new life you're not sure you deserve. Mr. Patel sat across from me, calm and patient, as if he'd been expecting this day for years. "Your father," he said softly, "was a very perceptive man. He trusted you more than you knew." I gripped the folder in my lap. "He never told me about these shares. Not once." He smiled faintly. "He wanted to protect you. He suspected Daniel's ambition might one day turn against you." My throat tightened. I remembered my father's cautious eyes on my wedding day. The way he had pulled me aside before the ceremony and said, "Don't lose your name in someone else's dream." Back then, I'd laughed. Now, his words burned like prophecy. Mr. Patel turned a page in the document. "Your father invested before the company went public. He registered 30% of DM holdings under your name through a blind trust. Daniel was never informed." 30%. I whispered. The number sounded surreal. He nodded. "It has remained dormant. But as of now, you are the legal owner." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The humiliation from that boardroom replayed in my mind. Daniel's voice, cold and professional, announcing my suspension, while Vanessa smiled behind him. I could still feel the sting of that betrayal, like fresh salt on an open wound. But now that pain began to harden into something else. Something sharper. Resolve. I leaned back, staring at the papers. "If I activate these shares, what happens?" Mr. Patel adjusted his glasses. "You'll be officially registered as a major shareholder. With your percentage, you'll hold the power to challenge company decisions, even the CEO himself." My lips parted slightly. Challenge him. The man who stripped me of my job, my home, and my name would soon answer to me. A silence filled the room, heavy but thrilling. I looked down at the company's logo embossed on the document, DM Holdings, the initials we once joked stood for Daniel and me. Now, they just stood for mine. I laughed softly, almost bitterly. He always wanted complete control. He's going to hate this. Patel's expression softened. Control only lasts until truth enters the room. I ran my fingers over my father's signature at the bottom of the final page. I hadn't realized how much I missed his quiet strength until now. Even in death, he was guiding me, handing me the means to rise without rage, to fight without screaming. Still, my voice trembled as I asked, "Can Daniel contest this?" "Not legally," Patel said firmly. "The trust is airtight. The only thing he can do is pretend he isn't afraid." That made me smile, a small, dangerous curve of my lips I didn't recognize as my own. Outside the window, clouds gathered over the city. The skyline shimmered like glass waiting to shatter. I thought about the girl I had been just days ago, crying in a parking lot, clutching a suspension letter, begging for an explanation from a man who'd already decided to erase me. She was gone now. In her place stood someone who finally understood what power meant, not cruelty, not revenge, but choice. I looked up at Patel. "What do I need to do?" He pushed a sleek black folder toward me. Inside was a simple form, already filled in. Only my signature was missing. "You can claim it tomorrow," he said, sliding a pen across the desk. "Once filed, it becomes public record within 48 hours. Tomorrow. One word, but it carried the weight of years of silence, submission, and heartbreak. I took the pen and held it loosely, staring at its silver body, catching the light. Daniel loved pens like this, custom, engraved, symbols of authority. I wondered how it would feel to use one against him. "Thank you," I murmured. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Patel nodded kindly. "Your father would be proud. He always believed you'd find your strength when the world underestimated you." My eyes burned. Then the world's about to learn how wrong it was. I left the office as dusk fell, the folder tucked tightly against my chest. The city lights were flickering on, one by one, like small awakenings. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel lost. I felt aligned. I walked past a shop window and caught my reflection, messy hair, tired eyes, but something fierce flickering behind them. The same glass that once showed me as a victim now reflected a woman holding her future in her hands. I whispered to my father's memory as the wind caught my hair. "Thank you for hiding this, Dad. I know what to do now. Mini cliffhanger / emotional sting. As Mr. Patel's words echoed in my mind, "You can claim it tomorrow," I clutched the pen tighter, already picturing Daniel's face when he realized the empire he ruled was already mine. I've walked through those glass doors 1,000 times before, but never like this. This time, my heels clicked with purpose, not obedience. Every step toward that boardroom felt like reclaiming a piece of myself Daniel had tried to bury. The receptionist looked up as I passed. Her usual polite smile faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. She must have thought I'd come to beg. Not today. When I reached the boardroom, the heavy glass door swung open with a soft hiss. Conversation died mid-sentence. The long table stretched before me, polished to perfection, surrounded by men and women who once avoided my gaze after Daniel humiliated me. But today, they couldn't look away. Daniel sat at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair like he owned the air we breathed. Vanessa stood beside him, tablet in hand, pretending to be busy. The moment his eyes met mine, I saw it, that split-second flicker of disbelief before his mask returned. "Emma," he said, voice clipped, trying for casual authority. "This is a private meeting." "Good," I replied, stepping forward, my voice steady but cold. "Because this concerns all of you." A murmur rippled through the room. I dropped the folder onto the table, the same one Patel had given me. It landed with a sharp thud that echoed louder than any words spoken that morning. Daniel's expression tightened. "What is this?" "Ownership," I said simply. 30% of DM Holdings. My name. My shares. My right to be here. Silence. Every pair of eyes turned to me, then to Daniel. A few of the older board members exchanged nervous glances. The CFO leaned forward, reading the document. His brow furrowed. "Is this authentic?" he asked quietly. Mr. Patel, who stood behind me as my legal representative, spoke before I could. "Filed this morning. Verified. Mrs. Hayes is now the company's largest individual shareholder." I could almost hear Daniel's breath catch. He stood abruptly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "This is absurd. That paperwork is years old. It doesn't hold weight now." "It does," Patel interrupted calmly. "The trust never expired. In fact, it activates stronger once public." Daniel's composure cracked for the briefest moment. I watched the vein in his jaw twitch, the same way it used to when he was cornered. "Emma," he said, tone darkening, "this isn't how you handle personal grievances." I tilted my head slightly. "No, but this is how I handle business." The room went still. I could feel the shift, the power sliding, invisible but undeniable, from his end of the table to mine. I stepped closer, resting my hand on the chair beside him, the one that used to be mine before he'd told me I didn't fit the image of leadership. "Funny how things change." Vanessa's voice broke through the tension. "This is ridiculous. You think showing up with old documents makes you relevant again." I turned to her slowly, meeting her smirk with calm precision. "Relevance comes with ownership, dear. You might want to remember that before you fetch his coffee again." Her face flushed crimson. Laughter, small, nervous, restrained, bubbled from one end of the table. Daniel shot them a warning glare, but it was too late. The cracks were spreading. I took a deep breath. "You see," I said, addressing the room, "when I was accused of leaking data, no one asked for proof. I was judged and discarded in front of everyone here. But as of today, I no longer answer to Daniel Hayes." The boardroom felt like it had shrunk, walls closing in, tension thick enough to taste. Daniel leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "You're playing with fire, Emma." I smiled faintly. "Then you shouldn't have handed me the match." The CFO cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Hayes, with Mrs. Hayes' current ownership, she has voting power over major decisions, including executive positions." Daniel froze. His hand clenched around his pen, knuckles white. I let the silence stretch, enjoying, for once, the sound of his unraveling. Then I leaned forward, my voice soft but steady, slicing through the quiet like a blade. "You suspended your majority shareholder," I whispered. The color drained from his face completely. For the first time, Daniel Hayes, the man who once commanded every room, couldn't find a single word to say. The board members shifted, whispering among themselves. Patel quietly gathered the documents, sliding them back into the folder. And me? I just smiled. Not with joy. Not even revenge. Just release. Because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of watching him learn what power really looked like when it came wrapped in grace and silence. Mini cliffhanger slash emotional sting. As the meeting dissolved into murmurs, Daniel's eyes met mine, not with anger but fear. And that's when I realized he still had one secret left, and I was about to uncover it. They used to whisper about me. Now they whisper around me. Every corridor in that glass tower hums with gossip, quiet enough to pretend it's harmless, loud enough for me to feel it scrape against my skin. I can feel the eyes. The glances over coffee mugs, the half-finished sentences when I walk by. Once, I was the woman behind the CEO. Today, I'm the woman who shook the floor beneath his throne. But make no mistake, power doesn't silence people. It feeds their curiosity. As I step out of the elevator, two assistants near the reception pretend to scroll their phones, their voices dropping when I pass. "Did you see her face in that meeting?" one whispers. Daniel looked terrified, the other giggles, trying to hide it behind a sip of coffee. I don't stop. I don't even blink. I've learned that real strength isn't in shouting back, it's in making them wonder what you're planning next. Still, the quiet tremor in my hands betrays me. My pulse is steady, but my fingers, they twitch. I keep them clasped together, pretending it's control. And then I see her. Vanessa. Her heels click sharply against the marble floor, echoing like warning shots. She's wearing her usual perfection, tailored black dress, sleek bun, and that faint perfume Daniel used to call his favorite. "Emma," she says, stepping too close. "You've made quite a mess." I tilt my head slightly, forcing a calm I don't feel. "Funny. That's what Daniel said the night he threw me out." Her smile is sharp. "You think the board will side with you? They'll see you for what you are, emotional, vindictive, unstable. Maybe," I murmur, "but they'll also see you for what you are, replaceable." For a moment, her mask slips. Her jaw tightens, eyes flashing something ugly. "Don't think this is over," she hisses, leaning in close. "Daniel's already fixing it." I hold her gaze. Then he should hurry. I'm getting good at cleaning up after his mistakes. The hallway feels smaller as she storms off, her perfume lingering, sweet but suffocating. I exhale, finally letting my hands fall to my sides. My phone buzzes. Once. Twice. "Daniel." The first message is short. "We need to talk." Then another. "Please, Emma. Don't do this here. Not like this." And finally, "You're making a mistake." I stare at the screen until the words blur. A week ago, those messages would have broken me. Today, they almost make me laugh. I type a single reply. "Too late, Daniel. You already did." I don't send it. I delete it. Because he doesn't deserve even that much power anymore. Instead, I lock my phone and walk toward my office, the small one on the lower floor that once belonged to me before he demoted me for optics. The same office where he'd once leaned against the doorframe, smiling, promising, "We're a team, Emma. Always." Now it's mine again. And he's the one standing outside looking in. Through the glass wall, I catch sight of him leaving his corner suite. His movements are frantic, his usually perfect composure cracked. He's pacing, gesturing wildly into his phone. His world is wobbling, and I'm the tremor that started. But the truth? I'm not celebrating. Not yet. Because there's still that tiny voice in my head whispering, he won't give up easily. By late afternoon, the entire office feels heavier. Conversations stop when I walk in. The hum of the air conditioning seems louder than usual. Even the building itself feels tense, like it's waiting for something to explode. I sit at my desk, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the glass window. For years, I saw myself through Daniel's eyes, timid, dependent, grateful. Now I see someone else. Someone unrecognizable. Someone becoming. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's from HR. "Mrs. Hayes, please check your email. There's an urgent notice regarding a shareholder meeting called by Mr. Daniel Hayes. Attendance required." I open the email. The words blur for a second as I read them. "Emergency shareholder meeting, 8 a.m. tomorrow." No explanation. No agenda. Just a list of attendees, and my name at the very top. I lean back in my chair, heartbeat steadying as realization sinks in. He's cornered, and cornered men don't surrender. They strike. The sun outside dips behind the skyline, painting the city in amber light. I watch it fade, feeling the weight of what's coming. Whatever Daniel's planning tomorrow, it won't be peace. Mini cliffhanger slash emotional sting. As the lights flicker off one by one across the office floor, my phone vibrates once more, a final message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have come back, Emma." He walked in like a storm. The door slammed so hard the glass trembled, and every conversation died instantly. Daniel's presence used to command respect. Today it commanded fear, not of his power, but of his desperation. I sat at the long mahogany table, papers neatly arranged, my back straight, my pulse calm. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and nerves. 12 board members. 2 lawyers. 1 war. "Let's begin," he said sharply, though his voice betrayed a tremor. "This meeting has been called to address a breach of trust within our leadership." My lips twitched. He was trying to play that card again. The irony almost made me laugh. He started pacing. His suit was immaculate as always, but his tie hung loose, his eyes red from a sleepless night. "My wife," he caught himself, "Mrs. Hayes, has been spreading false accusations. She's manipulating the company's assets, using personal grievances to sabotage my authority." Gasps whispered across the table. A few members exchanged looks, confusion, curiosity, disbelief. I waited, letting him talk, letting him dig. Finally, when he turned to me, expecting a reaction, I simply asked, "Are you finished?" His jaw clenched. "You're destroying everything we built, Emma." I smiled faintly. "No, Daniel. I'm rebuilding what you tried to burn." He slammed a hand against the table, making pens scatter. "You think this is about revenge? You're pathetic. Bitter. You." Enough. The word didn't come from me. It came from the CFO, Mr. Lang, whose calm authority cut through the tension like a blade. "We will not tolerate emotional outbursts in a formal meeting. Let Mrs. Hayes present her case." Daniel's eyes flashed. "There is no case." I met his glare and slowly stood, sliding a folder forward. "Then you won't mind if they see this." One by one, I passed around printed documents, account statements, internal memos, screenshots, all collected carefully over the past few months. Evidence. Proof. The projector hummed to life as I connected the USB drive. The first slide appeared on the wall. Unauthorized transfers. Personal expenditures. False invoices. Gasps again, this time sharper. Real. "Daniel," I said softly, "these are your transactions. 6 months of siphoning company funds through a shell vendor. I'm sure the board will find the amounts enlightening." He froze, eyes darting between the figures and the faces of his colleagues. That's not." "Oh, and before you deny it," I interrupted, pressing another button, "this might help refresh your memory." A voice recording filled the room. His voice. Vanessa's voice. The same whisper I had captured weeks ago, the night she laughed about clearing out the old wife's mess before the next board cycle. "Don't worry," Vanessa had purred on the recording. "Once she's gone, the merger funds will be easy to reroute." Every syllable echoed like a gunshot in the sterile air of the boardroom. Daniel's face drained of color. The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the clock ticking on the far wall. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. For years, I'd watched him command this room with arrogance and charm. Now he stood there, small, exposed, trembling in front of the empire he'd built on lies. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes, is this authentic?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "It's edited," he blurted suddenly, voice cracking. "She's lying. You all know how vindictive she is." I leaned forward, my tone quiet but precise. "That recording was verified by corporate counsel this morning. And as of 9 a.m., it's been filed with the Ethics Committee." The room erupted into murmurs. Papers shuffled. Eyes avoided his. He looked at me, and for a split second, beneath the anger and panic, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing control. I straightened, gathering my notes with calm efficiency. "You accused me of leaking data, Daniel. You paraded my humiliation in front of this company. But I didn't come here for revenge." I turned toward the board. "I came for truth." The chairman nodded solemnly. "Then we'll proceed to a vote." Daniel's eyes widened. "You can't do this." "Actually," Mr. Lang said evenly, "we can. Article 7.2, Misuse of Funds and Ethical Misconduct. A temporary suspension pending investigation." One by one, hands rose around the table. Every single one. Even Vanessa's chair was empty. She hadn't shown up today. Maybe she knew what was coming. Daniel looked around, chest heaving, as the realization sank in. The chairman spoke the words quietly, but they thundered in my ears. "The vote is unanimous. Daniel Hayes, you are hereby suspended from all executive duties, effective immediately." He turned to me, disbelief and betrayal swirling in his eyes. You planned this. I met his gaze evenly. No, Daniel. You did. The day you forgot who stood beside you. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when a kingdom falls. Emotional sting / mini cliffhanger. As Daniel was escorted out of the boardroom, his parting words echoed faintly down the hall. You think this is over, Emma? You have no idea what's coming. And for the first time in months, I believed him. The sound of silence hit harder than any applause. I walked into the office the morning after Daniel's suspension, and the air itself seemed different. No whispers, no sideways glances, just a calm, almost reverent stillness. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, clean, sharp, and unervingly permanent. His nameplate was gone. The polished mahogany desk that had once belonged to him now sat empty, dust-free, almost sacred. I ran my hand along the edge absent-mindedly, the weight of all that betrayal and power still lingering in the wood grain. Vanessa didn't last long. Word spread like wildfire. By 10 a.m., she had resigned, gathering her things with stiff, forced grace. I caught her eye in the elevator as she left. There was no smirk, no fury. Just the hollow look of someone who realized the game had moved on without them. I stepped into the main corridor, the place where gossip and cruelty once seemed like the walls themselves. Today, the same hallways seemed to bow slightly under my presence. Colleagues nodded quietly, their voices hushed, as if they were unsure if this Emma, the one who had been humiliated, suspended, ignored, was real. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The tension that had coiled in my shoulders for weeks finally loosened, and I walked taller than I had in years. The heels clicked differently now. Not in submission, not in fear. They clicked in measured authority. Yet, even in victory, there was a hollow ache. I passed the window that overlooked the city and paused. The skyline glimmered under the afternoon sun, a mirror of opportunity and ambition. I had taken back my power, claimed my place, and yet my chest still tightened when I thought of him. Because victory does not erase love. Because I still loved the man who had betrayed me. I sank into my chair, gazing at my reflection in the glass partition. The woman staring back seemed unrecognizable, strong, poised, untouchable, but with the same heart that had once opened itself to trust and vulnerability. It ached quietly, reminding me that some losses leave permanent marks. I opened my laptop and sorted through the board documents, making sure everything was in order. Every transfer accounted for, every record filed. The act of control was oddly soothing. I realized then that power was not a weapon, it was a shield. A shield I had finally claimed for myself. Footsteps echoed behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The office moved differently now, subtly, carefully around me. I leaned back, letting the silence wrap around my thoughts like a soft cloak. And yet, that cloak felt thin against the memory of nights spent wondering if he'd ever care again, nights haunted by the ghost of promises broken. The office, so quiet, almost seemed to whisper, "You've won." But at what cost? And then my phone buzzed on the desk. A name flashed across the screen. Daniel. My stomach twisted. My fingers hovered over the screen, as if touching it could somehow prepare me for the words. I swiped it open. Meet me tonight. Please. The simplicity of the message was deafening. No apology, no explanation. Just those 4 words, desperate and haunting, floating across the digital ether between us. I stared at the screen, my reflection layered over his words. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, to preserve the hard-earned distance I'd fought so long to create. But another part, the part that still remembered warmth, laughter, and the man I once loved, hesitated. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, as twilight settled over the streets. Shadows stretched across the corridors of the office. The silence felt fragile now, like the calm before another storm. I set my phone down slowly, my pulse picking up. I knew that message meant more than a meeting. It meant reckoning. And I also knew, whatever happened tonight, nothing would be the same again. Mini cliffhanger / emotional sting. As I stared out at the city, the soft glow of evening catching the edge of the glass, I whispered to myself, I'll go, but this time I'm going on my terms. The rain hit first. Not a drizzle, not a polite shower, but heavy, relentless sheets that soaked everything in sight. When I stepped into the parking lot, I saw him standing there, shoulders hunched, water running down his hair and face, clothes plastered to his body. Daniel looked smaller somehow, stripped of authority, stripped of his usual arrogance. I almost froze. There was something pitiful in the way he looked at me, like a man realizing he'd spent years holding sand in a clenched fist, only to watch it slip away. "Emma," his voice cracked, breaking through the rhythm of the rain. "Please." I kept walking toward him, heels sinking slightly into the wet asphalt. My coat clung to me, and my hair stuck to my neck, but I didn't care. I had rehearsed this moment for nights that felt like years. "I've lost everything," he said, voice trembling, "but I've lost you the most." I stopped just a few feet away, watching his face twist between desperation and shame. There were tears on his cheeks, mingling with the rain. The vulnerability was raw, almost disarming. For a fleeting second, I remembered mornings when his hand would brush mine over coffee, promises whispered in the soft light of our kitchen. I almost softened. Almost. Then the memory struck like a whip, the boardroom that morning. 200 eyes staring. His cold, practiced voice announcing my suspension. The humiliation. The whispers. The betrayal. I felt my stomach twist, the ghost of my own shame rising like bile. "Daniel," I said quietly, letting each word land. "Do you have any idea what you took from me?" He shook his head, lips trembling. I was blind. I didn't see it. I thought I could control everything. Control. I laughed softly, bitter and low. "You called me a liar. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You betrayed your vows. You suspended your own wife before the entire company. And now you want me to forgive a few words in the rain." He flinched as if struck, but his voice didn't waver. "Emma, please. I know I failed you." I cut him off, my voice cold now, the warmth of old love extinguished. "No, I can't live in the shadow of your mistakes. Not anymore. Not ever." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. My hands didn't shake. They had steadied over weeks of planning, legal consultations, and quiet reflection. I slid the envelope across the hood of his car. "Divorce papers," I said simply. His eyes widened. The rain ran faster now, or maybe it just seemed so. "Emma, you can't. Please, we can." "Save it," I interrupted. "There's nothing left to save. You lost your chance the moment you chose humiliation over love." I turned my back to him, feeling the weight lift slightly from my chest as I walked toward my car. The wet asphalt reflected the city lights in jagged streaks, each step like cutting ties with a life that once belonged to him and me both. I heard him call my name once, voice cracking in desperation. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt completely unburdened. Victory in the boardroom had its satisfaction, but walking away from him, finally free of the man who had betrayed my trust, was liberation. The rain pounded against my coat, mingling with tears I refused to shed. My reflection in the wet pavement blurred, the world around me dissolving into streaks of light and shadow. And yet, even in this freedom, my chest ached. Because love doesn't die with betrayal. It lingers, a ghost in the spaces you thought were empty. I slid into my car, shutting the door with a finality that echoed in the empty lot. His figure stood there, rain-soaked and small, and I felt no pull, no temptation, no old warmth. Only the quiet, hard knowledge that I had chosen myself. Emotional sting / mini cliffhanger. As I started the engine, the windshield streaked with rain and city lights, I whispered to myself, "This is the end." But endings are where new stories begin. I never imagined this day would feel so quiet. The boardroom, once a chamber of whispered judgments and invisible threats, now hummed with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off polished wood and chrome. For once, the weight of the room wasn't oppressive. It felt electric, full of potential. They didn't hesitate. Not a single vote against. Unanimous. I was offered the CEO position. The room seemed to hold its breath as the chairman slid the contract across the table, a gesture both ceremonial and profound. I took it slowly, my fingers brushing the smooth leather cover. The papers inside were more than signatures. They were trust, responsibility, and a promise I intended to keep. "Emma," the chairman said softly, "congratulations. You earned this." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. My eyes drifted to the faces around the table, some familiar, some new, but all watching, waiting. They had seen my fall. They had seen me suspended, humiliated, and doubted. And now they were watching me rise. I stood, the chair squeaking slightly beneath me. The room quieted further. I felt the weight of history pressing against my shoulders, but in a different way now. This was my power, my choice, my company. I began my speech quietly, my voice measured, calm, but carrying a sincerity that I had not yet allowed myself to show. I want to start by acknowledging the people who made this possible, the employees who stayed, worked, and remained professional through difficult times. You saw what happened to me. You saw what happened in this company. And yet, you continued to give your best. I thank you. Heads nodded. A few smiles flickered. The atmosphere softened. I know trust is fragile. I know respect is earned, not given. And I promise, from this day forward, transparency will guide every decision, fairness will guide every action, and respect will be the foundation of our culture. This company is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us who care about it, who work for it, who believe in it. I paused, letting the words settle in the room. The silence was not awkward. It was receptive, alive. It felt surreal, speaking from this position after months of humiliation and betrayal. I thought about Daniel's cold eyes the morning he announced my suspension. I thought about the whispers of gossip, the corridors that had once felt like prisons, the nights of anger and heartbreak. And now I was here, standing taller than ever. Not because I had crushed him, but because I had claimed what was rightfully mine. The employees began to clap softly at first, then, with growing warmth. The applause was not for vengeance, it was recognition. Recognition that I had survived, that I had fought, and that I would lead with integrity. Vanessa's absence still lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the treachery I had outlasted, but was faint now, replaced by the light of possibility. I took a deep breath, letting the energy of the room fill me. My chest swelled with a quiet pride, tempered with humility. For the first time, the company felt alive, not just as a business, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of people whose efforts mattered and whose voices would be heard. The meeting ended, but the day didn't feel over. I walked past the open office doors, feeling eyes follow, not with fear or doubt, but with expectation and respect. And then my phone buzzed. A journalist. Unknown number. Mrs. Hayes, this is Julia Moreno. I cover corporate affairs. Can I get your side of the story? I paused, staring at the message. My thumb hovered over the screen. My rise, my humiliation, my revenge, and my victory, all of it could be splashed across headlines by tomorrow. I felt the familiar rush, exposure, power, and danger all wrapped into one. I typed a single word in reply. Yes. The screen blinked, and the quiet hum of the office seemed to shift, carrying a promise. The story was no longer mine alone. It would belong to everyone who saw, read, and judged. And in that moment, I realized leadership wasn't just about power. It was about owning your truth, fully and unapologetically. The city outside glimmered under the afternoon sun. For the first time in months, I felt the rush of possibility, untainted by fear. The company was alive. And so was I. Mini cliffhanger/emotional sting. As I set my phone down and gazed out at the skyline, I whispered to myself, let them see the story, but they won't know the half of it yet. The lights were blinding, not in the cruel way of judgment, but in a way that demanded honesty. They cast long shadows across the studio, highlighting the edges of my face, the faint tremor in my hands I refused to show. I sat upright, legs crossed, heart hammering, but not from fear. From anticipation. From the weight of telling my story on my terms. The host leaned forward, eyes sharp, notebook open. Emma, so many people have seen snippets online, but tell us the real story. How did you reclaim everything? I exhaled slowly, letting the calm settle around me like armor. This wasn't a confession for sympathy. It was a testimony. Proof that betrayal could be twisted into power, that humiliation could be transformed into authority. I'll start with this, I said quietly, my voice steady. For years, I believed that love meant sacrifice. That trust meant loyalty. That my place was behind him, always behind him. And for that belief, I was punished. Publicly, personally, professionally. The host nodded, encouraging but restrained. And yet you didn't crumble. No, I said, meeting the camera's lens as if speaking directly to everyone who had ever doubted themselves. I stood up. I watched. I waited. And when the time came, I claimed what was rightfully mine, not to hurt anyone, not for revenge, but because I refused to be invisible. I told them about the suspension, about Vanessa, about the boardroom, the evidence, the humiliation. I spoke of the nights pacing my apartment, the quiet rage, and the careful planning. I spoke of heartbreak, yes, but also strategy, courage, and resolve. Every sentence landed like a stone in water, rippling outward. The crew behind the cameras murmured softly, barely daring to breathe. "And Daniel," the host asked, voice gentle, "your husband, your betrayal." I paused, not because I didn't want to answer, but because I wanted the truth to hit fully. "He made his choices," I said softly. "And I made mine. Some losses leave scars. Some betrayals leave lessons. Mine left me with the clarity to reclaim my life and my company." The cameras continued rolling, capturing every nuance, the slight quiver of my lips, the hard glint in my eyes, the calm that belied the storm I had lived through. The interview ended, but the story didn't. Within hours, it was trending online. Shares, comments, articles. Everyone wanted to know how the woman, who had been suspended in front of 200 people, had risen to claim her place at the top. And I knew. I knew because my phone buzzed again, screen lighting up like a small fire in the dark. "Daniel." I froze for a moment, thumb hovering. One message. One single line. "You won." For a second, I felt a flicker, a whisper of the old emotions, but it was fleeting. The woman who had spent months building power from humiliation no longer needed his recognition. No longer needed his approval. I deleted the message. No reply. No acknowledgement. Nothing. Because winning wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Outside the studio, the city lights blinked against the night sky, reflections dancing across the rain-slick streets. Inside, the hum of cameras, crew chatter, and editing equipment filled space, but I was quiet. Peaceful. Centered. I thought about the corridors I had once walked, the boardroom where he trembled, the rain-soaked parking lot, the divorce papers. All the moments of fury, heartbreak, and triumph condensed into this one. Being seen, not as a victim, not as a wife defined by a man's mistakes, but as a woman who had taken everything life tried to steal and turned it into strength. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. The weight of the past months slid off my shoulders, leaving a hollow space that felt like freedom. The screen flashed again, notifications piling up. Articles, shares, comments, praise, shock, awe. The world had watched me rise. And Daniel, he was left on the other side, watching powerless. I smiled faintly, fingers brushing the deleted message. Some victories didn't need witnesses. Some victories were complete because you knew you earned them. Emotional sting / mini cliffhanger. As the studio lights dimmed and the crew began packing up, I whispered to myself, the city skyline reflecting in the glass behind me. And now, the world will hear my story, exactly as it happened. Sunlight poured in like a revelation. The office, once a cage of whispers and judgment, was bathed in gold. Glass walls reflected the city skyline, and my own reflection, sharper now, steadier. I paused at the entrance, letting the warmth hit my face, feeling the hum of life inside the building, my building rising around me. For months, these corridors had felt like a gauntlet. Every step a reminder of humiliation, betrayal, and restraint. Every whispered conversation a shadow of my own doubt. Today they felt open, alive, welcoming. They weren't mine yet, I was theirs, and they were mine. I walked slowly, letting my heels click against polished floors, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The familiar scent of coffee, paper, and polished wood enveloped me. It was grounding. It was mine. The boardroom doors loomed ahead. I stopped and stared at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back at me wasn't the one who had been suspended, shamed, or silenced. She was taller, her shoulders square, her eyes unflinching. There was a calm fire there, a reminder that power was not just claimed, it was lived. I whispered to myself, barely audible over the hum of the city outside. He suspended me, but that's when I began to rise. The memory hit sharp, the morning Daniel had called my name, his voice so cold, the room filled with dozens of pairs of eyes watching me crumble. I could almost feel the echo of that humiliation, a phantom weight on my chest. And yet, it no longer held me down. I entered the boardroom fully, letting the glass reflect not just my image, but my presence. My employees were already there, quietly arranging papers, sipping coffee, adjusting chairs. They looked up as I walked in, a ripple of recognition passing through the room. Some nodded softly, others smiled faintly, but all eyes reflected respect and cautious optimism. I crossed to the head of the table, sliding into the CEO's chair, and allowed myself a deep breath. The leather beneath my hands felt solid, real. I ran my fingers along the edge, savoring the sensation of ownership, not just of the company, but of my own life. The city outside shimmered, each building catching the early light like sparks. I thought about Daniel, about the arrogance, the betrayal, the humiliation, and then I released it. Not in anger, not in spite, but because it no longer belonged to me. Justice had come quietly, meticulously. The suspension, the boardroom victory, the interview, all chapters in a story I had authored with patience and strategy. And now power was mine, not in the sense of revenge, but in the sense of sovereignty over my own story. I stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, letting the lights splash across my face. The city pulsed beneath me, full of possibility. Each honking car, each flickering billboard, each silhouette rushing along the streets below was a reminder that life moved on, and so could I. I thought about the rain-soaked parking lot, the divorce papers, the deleted messages, the whispers in the corridors. Each memory was a stitch in a tapestry that had once threatened to unravel me. Now it was a design I could finally recognize as mine. My reflection in the glass was no longer haunted. The eyes that had feared betrayal now sparkled with clarity. The hands that had trembled in rage and fear now rested confidently on the table, steady, capable. I took another deep breath, feeling the quiet hum of the office around me, the soft rustle of papers, muted footsteps, faint conversation. Harmony finally. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt complete. Justice, power, and peace finally belonged to me. I whispered, almost as a secret to myself, a confession, a promise. This is mine. All of it. Every step, every victory, every lesson. I survived. I rose. And I will not look back. The sunlight shifted, scattering across the room like liquid gold. The office, once a battlefield, was alive again. I was alive again. And in that quiet, sunlit moment I knew, for the first time, I had truly won. Final emotional closure. The glass reflected the city, my reflection, and the light of possibility, and I whispered softly. He suspended me, and that's exactly when I began to rise. Now everything is mine.